Hey, welcome to a PSL Demo Day. We're here today with Mark Frischmuth. He's Executive Director and the founder of DemocracyLab, a platform that connects volunteers to projects for the public good. Mark, thanks for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. My name is Mark Frischmuth. I am the Executive Director of DemocracyLab. And what you see is DemocracyLab's home screen. We are an open source nonprofit platform helping to empower people who use technology for public good. And so the way that we do that, we've taken a look at the Tech for Good ecosystem. What we have seen is that there are lots of people with really good ideas for how technology can make the world a better place. Bringing those ideas to life is challenging. If you're a for-profit enterprise, you can put together a great pitch deck, go out, and if your idea is good, you can find a venture capitalist or some other person who's seeking to make money and often get them to make an investment. It's trickier when you have an idea for technology that creates public benefit rather than shareholder value. The people who hold the purse strings for public benefit projects, people in foundations and government, are generally more risk averse. They are looking for more certainty about how their investment is going to affect people. And generally, I think Tech for Good projects find themselves in a cycle of futility where they need to raise money to build a tech product. They need to demonstrate impact in order to be able to raise money, and they need a tech product in order to be able to demonstrate impact. So this can create a cycle of futility where lots of really good ideas don't get built, don't get tested, and the pace of social and civic innovation stagnates. DemocracyLab has built a platform that attempts to disrupt that cycle of futility by making it really easy for Tech for Good projects to attract skilled volunteer labor and use that labor to launch their ideas, test them in the world, start to demonstrate impact, and then hopefully, based on that impact, be able to take the next stage in their development and scale their growth. So here basically we are connecting stakeholders, volunteers, project leaders, and companies. The types of projects that we serve are summarized in this 2x2 matrix. If an organization is either a government or nonprofit entity, or it is creating public intellectual property, then it is eligible to be featured on DemocracyLab. An organization doesn't have to fill both of those criteria, just one. We make some pretty narrow exceptions for social enterprises that are for-profit building proprietary technology, but the social benefit has to be really, really clear and compelling for us to include those types of projects in the platform. We are attempting to monetize our work by engaging companies, asking companies to either sponsor our platform and events or to do corporate employee engagement events. We have had some success with that, but not nearly as much as we would like. The bulk of our platform lives behind this Volunteer Now button. So if we click here, we are taken to the Find Projects page, which lists out some 240 or so different projects. And these cover all range of issues, from doing policy simulations like Policy Engine does, to helping creators in India to bring their products to market, to helping homeless people or people with food insecurity to have access to food that is about to be discarded by grocery stores or restaurants. We can look down and see all sorts of different Tech for Good projects listed on the platform, including Democracy Lab itself. We are not only the platform that makes these connections possible, we are also a significant user of the platform. This is where we get most of our volunteers who build, design, research, our feature development come through the platform itself. So somebody could just scroll through all of these different projects and find one that they think is interesting. They also could, oops, I accidentally clicked one. They also could decide, that they want to use these filters. Supposing, I was a backend software developer and I was really interested in taxes. Let's see if oh look, I found Policy Engine, and now I could click here to learn more about the project. I could see the team, the different roles that are available for me to work on, and so on. So one of the things that we have discovered in our early research is that when we talked to project leaders, they consistently told us that the cost of onboarding new volunteers often exceeded the benefits. When we talked to volunteers, they often told us that projects are too disorganized for them to onboard and contribute to effectively. The insight that we took from those observations is that both of these problems could be addressed by nudging project leaders towards greater transparency. So every time a project is created on Democracy Lab, they are prompted to provide links to things like their GitHub repository, their messaging tool, various other links that may be helpful. What this allows is for potential volunteers to dig deep into a project before they reach out and offer to help. What this does is it reduces the number of false positives that project leaders get. The volunteers are generally more confident that this is a project they want to volunteer for rather than just something they want to learn more about. And it also has the effect of improving the documentation of the projects and the onboarding processes of the projects. Just as if you were going to invite somebody over for dinner, you'd likely, tidy up a little bit. The same thing happens here, that this publicly linked documentation gets tidied up just by the fact of posting it here online. That was, in fact, one of the takeaways. There's a project that used Democracy Lab for a little bit called Civiform, which was a collaboration between Google.org and the city of Seattle to have one benefits application for all the different government services. When they participated in one of the Democracy Lab hackathons, the big takeaway for them was, we've got to clean up our documentation. If we want to be able to onboard new volunteers effectively at all, we've got to really look at what we're saying and the information that we're presenting in our documentation to make it easier for them. So this is, the Find Projects interface. Again, several hundred projects that someone can contribute to. We also have a groups feature, which makes it possible for civic tech organizations to list their projects in one place and keep them up to date very easily. A feature that we just rolled out that we are just starting to see some adoption for is visible here at the Open San Diego website. And you'll see here on Democracy Lab that they have two projects that are listed, San Diego Voters Voice and InCiv. The feature that we just rolled out allows for Open San Diego at their sort of native domain to list out those same projects, embedding them from Democracy Lab. So a problem that we've seen a lot of civic tech organizations around the US and around the world have is they want to be able to onboard volunteers efficiently for their projects, but they don't want to direct them away from their site. They want to be able to, once they have that volunteer's attention, they want to be able to keep it. They don't want to send them elsewhere. So somebody can, on this Open San Diego domain, learn about the various projects. They can apply for those projects. They can reach out to the project leader. So this is an MVP of this feature, but we're hoping that this proves valuable and encourages greater adoption for some of these like-minded organizations around the world. And when we first launched this platform back in the summer of 2018, we had built a two-sided marketplace connecting projects and volunteers, but we didn't have any projects and we didn't have any volunteers. So what we decided to do is throw a hackathon and see who came. So at the time, I was in Seattle, most of our team was in Seattle, and so we got the Code Fellows, one of the local code boot camps, to generously donate their space. We invited all the other Tech for Good groups we could find, encouraged them to invite all their volunteers, get all the different projects they knew of to sign up, and basically threw an event on a Saturday morning. And that event, we pretty clearly tapped into unmet demand because there were, I think, 21 different projects that participated, about 120 people who showed up, and there was just a ton of energy in the room. And so we decided that was so much fun and so impactful that we were just going to do that every other month. And so we did, and did that all through 2019 and into 2020. And then here this event was scheduled for March 14th back at Code Fellows. And I think we all remember what happened around then. Seattle was the epicenter in the US of the COVID outbreak. And so we pivoted really quickly to making this a virtual event. The state of emergency in the US was declared on March 13th, and our event was March 14th. Fortunately, we made that call about 10 days earlier. That was our first virtual event, and the first one that we used our platform to as a means of RSVPing and convening. And we then continued to do a bunch of events. We started to find that other organizations were interested in using our platform as well, and so had a sprinkling of those types of events mixed in. And then if we kind of fast forward to September of last year, this was the first time that we determined it was safe to convene in person again. So we held a hybrid event. This was both in the Seattle area at the Microsoft Reactor and then online everywhere. So that was pretty cool to be able to do that. In January, we did something even crazier where we had an event in Tokyo, in Seattle, in Lagos, Nigeria, connecting people doing tech for good work all around the world. And did something a little bit similar for Earth Day, where we had events in Japan and Taiwan, as well as an event in Seattle. So that is, the hackathons have been a really important part of building community around DemocracyLab. And so we've really enjoyed that. We have paused in the short term just because they're a lot of work and not generating any revenue, which at the moment means we can't do them. This about page just kind of has some high-level info. Our mission is to empower people use technology for public good. Our vision is that technology will one day enable our collective intelligence to solve our most challenging problems while empowering all members of our societies. And these values really are the constellation that guide our thinking, that we use to navigate decisions. And so we are a volunteer-built platform. So, we are built by the community for the community. We believe everybody has something to contribute, and so nobody is ever turned away because their skills aren't good enough. Um, Collaboration and transparency have been really important to us. Because we are a volunteer-driven organization, we have higher levels of turnover than you would have at a for-profit company where there's the incentive and accountability that a paycheck provides. We do not try to prevent that volunteer turnover. We accept that that is part of the way we operate. We do try to mitigate the negative effects of it by having a really strong culture of documentation about the work we do. That documentation should all be public facing unless there's a really compelling reason that it not be. And then we encourage collaboration, which is a little bit of redundancy when it comes to how we form teams. We'll almost always have 3 or 4 people assigned to collaborate on any particular task. That's both because we think that good ideas generally come from more than one person, and also because if somebody then does have to drop off of the task for any reason, there are other people who still have the full scope of the work in their head who can either see it to completion or onboard new people to help them see it to completion. So that is a general overview. I am also going to take you into the Wayback Machine because it's relevant for this group. Jason and I were talking before we started about how DemocracyLab came to be. And I was sharing the story, which I'll repeat briefly now, that it was the day after the 2004 election that was a kind of a low point emotionally for me. If you remember, that was the Bush versus Kerry. We had invaded Iraq, which I think in hindsight was a even more of a world-shaking event than we recognized at the time. I personally wasn't in favor of that. And when the election happened, to me, it was a referendum on should we be in Iraq or not. But it was also the year that anti-gay marriage initiatives were on the ballots in swing states. And that was credited for driving conservative turnout. And I remember that next day, I went to sleep not knowing for sure who won and woke up with the election being called. And someone who I was listening to on the TV said America voted its values. And that really hurt my head. And so I started to think about what if we could use the internet to map out the connections that exist in people's mind between the values they believe in, the objectives they want to accomplish, and the policies that they advocate. And so we did build a product to demonstrate that. I'm going to play a demo video. This product was circa 2009, and I think that this video is probably all of the archive, other than the the code base that's still up on GitHub. I'm just going to play this. So I thought this might be of interest to some of you. Hi, this is Mark with DemocracyLab, and today I'm going to take you on a quick demonstration tour of our software platform. We have framed up an issue, a very controversial one here, abortion, to demonstrate how our platform works. Today I am going to play the part of a pro-choice person in my participation in the platform. And so there are really 3 steps to the participation. Prioritizing the values that are important to you, the objectives that you want to accomplish, and the policies that you advocate. Really, we think of it as a why, what, and how approach to thinking about political issues. So as I think about these different values and their relative importance to me, I think that in my pro-choice stance, that reason is important, compassion is very important, liberty is important. Faith, I don't have a strong opinion about, and I'm confused about what life means, so I am placing it in a no opinion area. And I then move on to objectives. I strongly agree that we should reduce unintended pregnancies. I agree moderately that we should expand availability of abortions. I agree that we should maintain access to abortions. I disagree that we should restrict access to abortions, and I strongly disagree that we should abolish all abortions. And finally, I'm going to move on to policies, and I disagree that we should eliminate federal funding. I strongly agree that affordable contraception for all is a good idea. I agree that if necessary, the federal government should intervene. I disagree with state level restrictions. I strongly agree in investing in birth control education programs. I agree to repeal state level restrictions to abortion. I think it's important that we maintain Roe versus Wade. And I strongly disagree with overturning Roe v. Wade. So now that I've completed this prioritization, I click the submit button, and I'm presented with a couple of diagrams showing my feedback and how it relates to that of the community. The black dots indicate my positions on the various policies that we evaluated. You can see in the diagram, strongly disagree, disagree, no opinion, agree, strongly agree for each of these. And do this similarly with the objectives that we evaluated and the values that we considered. So I can see how I relate to the community. And then for a high-level view of the community as a whole, I can see the connections between the various values that we considered, the objectives and policies. And then by hovering over various parts of the diagram, I can see the positive and negative correlation. So the darker gray indicates a positive correlation in people who prioritized a value and its connection with a particular objective. And then I can see positive correlations between that objective and a particular policy. The light gray lines indicate a negative correlation. So as you might expect, you see for example, a positive correlation between the value of faith and the objective of abolishing all abortions and the policy of overturning Roe versus Wade. You can dig into the details of the diagram. We are pursuing our next iteration of development, and we'll be adding more features, but thought this would be a good initial tour. Thanks for your time. So that is kind of the Wayback Machine of DemocracyLab. That is the point of origin. Just close that before it starts playing. What I guess briefly just talk about the pivot that occurred. So we had built that in late 2008 and used it in beginning of 2009. Early 2009, Obama took office and signed the Open Government Directive, saying that government would be participatory, transparent, and collaborative. And I said, sweet, I don't have to do this. The federal government will do this. I will spend more time earning a living because I had been neglecting that a little bit. And so I kind of took a break for a little while. Fortunately, that promise of the Open Government Directive didn't materialize in reality in quite the way that I or many other people might have hoped. And so a few years later, I re-engaged in the space, but the landscape was very different. Rather than not being able to find anything quite like what I imagined using the internet to crowdsource public policy, around 2011, 2012, there were hundreds or maybe thousands of different iterations of similar ideas. And that's what prompted me to start thinking less about, how do you build the best tool to crowdsource public policy, and more about why are so many really smart, well-intentioned people reinventing wheels, not learning from each other's experiences, competing when they should be collaborating, and having so little collective impact. And that is what began the transition to what Democracy Lab is today. Trying to provide a marketplace for people engaged in the Tech for Good ecosystem to be able to allocate resources more effectively, to be able to share information about what's working and what's not. And we're definitely seeing positive outcomes and impact that projects that otherwise are accomplishing things that otherwise they would not have, because they've been able to attract volunteer labor from Democracy Lab. It's probably a good spot for me to pause and to see what questions folks might have.
Yeah, Mark, thank you so much for that. And I'm just super impressed with the platform you've built. I mean, from the user interface perspective, it looks great. And then just the number of projects on here. And I guess in thinking about that, and you kind of touched on this, but the collaborating or sharing across projects, it almost looked like in scrolling through some of those, you could tell that there was some sharing of ideas across these projects. But can you give some examples, and then maybe talk a little bit about like the way in which that happens? Is it at these hackathons? Is it in person, or is it just from being part of this community? They're seeing each other and learning, or is it kind of more explicit?
Yeah, I think that this is something that the hackathons were great at, was getting people in the same room at the same time, whether it's in person or virtually, and being able to talk through what they're working on. We saw that with projects that were dealing with transportation. One of the projects, AB Street, that's like almost like a game where you can edit the map of the roads, collaborating with a professor at Arizona State University working on a smart city planning project. And to see them, they see each other's pitches, they talk, they figure out what they can work on together, and learn from each other, and are both more effective as a result. I've thought a little bit about how to make that happen more consistently outside of the hackathon events. And that's it's a little bit challenging, because like we have a Slack space that we use primarily for inter-project communication, everybody working on Democracy Lab, and it's sort of noisy enough already. But it have thought also about, is there a way other than kind of our regular communication outbound to project leaders to make those connections easier between different projects? And they can certainly, somebody sees a project that has similarities, they can very easily click the contact project button, to reach out and initiate collaboration. But it definitely would be nice if we could figure out a way to make that happen a little bit more organically outside of the context of the hackathons.
Mm-hmm. And then another question is just like from a perspective of a project who wants to leverage your platform, how does one get involved?
Easily, there's basically this create a project, button, and that takes you into the user flow to start building your project. And there are a number of steps here, but it couldn't be a whole lot easier. And from the home page, it's you indicate that you'd like to create a project, and that takes you to the same spot.
Okay. Yeah, that looks really easy. Is there a group at Democracy Lab that reviews and makes sure a project is acceptable? You mentioned kind of, you're looking particularly for nonprofits with kind of public goods related projects or open source projects. Do you have a committee at Democracy Lab that would review a project before it's posted?
It's primarily up to me to look at them. If I have questions about the suitability, I can bounce it off the other team leaders at Democracy Lab and, potentially our board of directors. But, we try to be very responsive, and we also try to say yes unless there's a clear reason that we should say no. So in general, we, are trying to approve those projects, within 24 hours. And, we'll see ask clarifying questions if there's any ambiguity. We definitely do occasionally see people who are basically seeking free labor for their startup. And so, we explain that, no, that's not what this is for. Let me know if you're, misunderstanding what your project is all about. But for the most part, we see just suitable projects being submitted.
Yeah. Okay. And now, oh, go ahead, Max.
Oh, thanks. Mark, thank you so much for everything you've done. It's really been completely transformative for us at Policy Engine to have Democracy Lab, both as a source of volunteer coders and other kind of contributors. And also we did participate in the Code for Africa hackathon, sort of built a prototype of Policy Engine Nigeria there. So just love what you've done. I was curious because I think probably the majority of people who come to Policy Engine through Democracy Lab are, let's say, recent graduates of data science master's programs, those kind of things, and often international students who are seeking a way to preserve immigration status until they find a full-time job. So it seems like, super symbiotic that way. We hopefully can provide some as the. I'm curious what the general composition of folks who come to the platform as contributors or seeking contributors are, and what kind of outreach you do to sort of make that dynamic population.
Yeah, that's actually a great question about the composition of the volunteers. That is not something I have a ready answer for, but that we should have data in our in our database. So we're actually building a dashboard feature right now, and that would be I think a useful thing to show on that dashboard. The increase in international graduates seeking a volunteer opportunity to extend their immigration status is something that we've seen a dramatic uptick in over the past year or so. I would be hard pressed to explain why, but there's definitely more awareness than there used to be that Democracy Lab is a place that people can find projects to contribute to. So much so that I personally kind of built a form to onboard people who need volunteer letters and a mail merge to create those letters.
You and I both. Okay, yeah.
Because it can be pretty time consuming. So that is, I think I agree, it's symbiotic. It's a good opportunity for the volunteers. It's great for the organizations to be able to have some of these extremely talented people making contributions to the projects. In terms of the sort of the marketing and promotion of the platform, we do some promotion on social media. We create blog posts. We have had at one point we had somebody who I guess I would call a social media influencer post about Democracy Lab. This was a person who was an expat from Nigeria, and suddenly we had more traffic from Nigeria than we did from the U.S. It was kind of a pretty remarkable example of the power, that one person can have if they're, being widely followed out there in the world. But we have very little sort of bandwidth or bench strength for marketing at the moment. So most of the discovery of the platform is happening organically right now.
I guess a follow-up to that, Code for America used to have this brigade model where there would be local groups that coalesce around building civic tech for their communities. And they've since disbanded that. There's, many of those brigades are starting independent organizations as well. But it seems like a lot of those projects, certainly a lot of them make sense to be local. Some of them might be a bit duplicative across the country. So it feels like Democracy Lab is a nice way to build sort of a cross-country or global community around projects that can serve multiple areas. I'm curious what the connection between Democracy Lab and Code for America brigade model is, if any.
Yeah. So this, if we look at our events, this Code for America, oops, not the events, the groups. We did this Impact Sprints program with Code for America last year, which was unfortunately kind of the last gasp of the brigade network. I really hope we didn't kill it, but it sounds like this decision had been made long before then. But we were working pretty closely with Code for America, at arm's length, as a sort of an outside independent organization. It's been a rough year for the civic tech or tech for good ecosystem. Code for America deciding to end its brigade program was tough. Code for All has run out, which is, if for anybody who doesn't know, Code for All is the umbrella civic tech organization of which Code for America is a member, as well as all of not all, most, if not all, of the Code for groups around the world or similar organizations. So, Code for Pakistan, Code for Germany, and so on, are all under this Code for All umbrella. They ran out of money this year. They had attempted to, their grant funding had run out. They attempted to raise money, but they've had to lay off their staff and move to an all volunteer model. In the sort of aftermath of the Code for America decision, a new organization has formed called the Alliance of Civic Technologists. So it is basically what Code for America's brigade program was. It's many of the same people and same organizations, and they're in the process of getting nonprofit status of their 501c3 application, and setting up all of that organizational infrastructure. But the downside is that that's been disruptive, that many people who were engaged are no longer engaged. Many projects that were going concerns have sort of atrophied, and fallen into disrepair. So that's part of the reason that we rolled out this iframe feature, that allows for projects on Democracy Lab to show up on other organizations' homepages, figuring that this will be useful for those Alliance of Civic Technologists groups that are, in most cases, the descendants of their Code for America brigades, to begin to attract the volunteers back into their organizations that they need to be able to do that local civic tech work, and to collaborate with other people around the country and around the world as well.
Great. I'll check that out and see, maybe we can embed it on our site too. So thanks.
And then Mark, I'm sitting here at my university and wondering, do you get much help from student volunteers? Is there kind of a way to push this or kind of make people aware of Democracy Lab at computer science departments or public policy schools across the country?
Yeah, we definitely do. Right now, for example, we have a team of students from Carnegie Mellon University who are working on that impact dashboard feature that I had alluded to earlier. And so we've had other student teams from different universities, both in computer science and public policy and design schools, all do projects for Democracy Lab and also for other projects that use Democracy Lab. It is challenging as well, though, because these student teams do require oversight and supervision and guidance to be able to do quality work. And so, particularly when you're an all volunteer team, that time only, you can only take on so many of those types of projects and probably only one at a time. There is right now there's a student at Duke who's trying to put together some sort of resources to share across universities about Democracy Lab and the projects that use Democracy Lab. We did do a collaboration a couple years ago with the Public Interest Technology University Network, which is, I think, that's a good channel to distribute this kind of information. And that was supported by the Ford Foundation, if my memory serves me correctly, and is doing good work to activate students at universities around the country to participate in these sorts of projects.
Okay, well, that's great to hear. Yeah, seems like such a tough problem for projects that are relying on volunteers, is finding them, and you're helping with that. And the other part is making them useful. And there's a lot of work to be done there. I feel like Max's group, Policy Engine, has done a really good job in terms of getting a wide variety of contributors. And Max, you can say if this is right or not, but to me, it seems like, you've done a lot right in terms of making sure the code is tested and there are kind of templates for your issues and PRs. And there's a lot of infrastructure built up to help people who are relatively new to the project contribute. And that's, I guess, beyond Democracy Lab's hands. But again, Democracy Lab could help bring those volunteers to you as they have with Policy Engine, but it's up to the project to make it easy for people to get engaged.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we could certainly improve our documentation. I think we have quite a bit, partially through necessity, because we've had so much interest, especially from Democracy Lab, and it's accelerated our velocity tremendously. Also, would be keen to learn from other open source orgs on best practices on onboarding. So if that became like a feature of Democracy Lab, we'd love to see that too.
And one of the things that we discovered through that Code for America Impact Sprints project is, as a result of that, we created a Start Here guide, and we made this a recommendation to the Impact Sprints projects. But basically, this is the document that we point new volunteers to really clearly describe what we're trying to accomplish, what the onboarding process looks like. We include information about the various teams, who the team lead is, where to go in Slack, all of the meeting notes that are there, and then any team specific onboarding documentation. So basically, what onboarding volunteers can be a very time consuming part of running a project. What we've tried to do is let the documentation do as much of that work as possible. We also, hold a weekly onboarding meeting. And so, we basically every week on Fridays, we have a volunteer orientation. And we ask the volunteers to go find your team's meeting on this calendar, and copy it to your calendar, so that we just want it to be as self-service as possible, because one, a little bit of friction is, I think, okay. If somebody's not willing to go and find their team's meeting and add it to their calendar and then join, they're not likely to kind of do the work that's necessary to be a meaningful contributor to the project. And so we're not trying to be personally responsible for ensuring 100% of volunteers have this transformative volunteer experience. That's I don't think ever, that's not a realistic goal. What we want is to give people who really want to volunteer an opportunity to do so, and to be able to onboard easily without creating a lot of overhead for the existing project team.
Well, Mark, thank you again for joining us today. This has been really insightful. I'm incentivized to get engaged and put projects on DemocracyLab, and I hope others watching are also. Yeah, and I again encourage folks to look at it and of course donate to your project, because this is super important, this foundation for connecting volunteers to projects for the public good. So Mark, really thanks so much for your work.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun talking to you guys.
All right, Mark, take care. Bye.
Okay. Bye.